Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to your weekly box office breakdown. I am your host, Garret Neal, and we are here live on Radio DePaul, Chicago's College Connection. It's the first episode of the winter quarter. It's also January, which means not a whole lot coming out right now. Not too exciting. But, of course, we will always find something exciting to talk about. And honestly, even if there's not a whole lot new coming out, there's always some movie breaking down some barriers, breaking some records, doing something interesting at the box office. And there certainly was this week, even if the new movies weren't super exciting or really anything most people were looking forward to. But with that being said, let's do a little rundown, a preview of what will be coming up throughout this show. We're going to be here till just about 7 o'clock, and we're going to take a look at how Upside was able to rise to the top of this week's box office and how Aquaman was crowned the king of the DCEU. And we'll ask and try and answer the question, will Glass be unbreakable next weekend at the box office? And with that, let's go right into this week's top 5, and as alluded to just a few moments ago, The Upside was a comedy dramedy with Bryan Cranston and Kevin Hart. Opened up to a surprisingly high $20.3 million in its opening weekend in just over 3,000 theaters. You know, expectations were not high for this film coming into this week. Had very mediocre critical reviews at a 5.2 on IMDb, 44 Metascore, and a 40% critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes. But hey, it's a nice feel-good story, and apparently audiences kind of liked it because it did very well at the box office for what was expected, and also did get a 88% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Is what it's sitting at right now, and it got an A cinema score for those coming out of the theaters, which is very solid. And so, I mean, hey, maybe since there's not a whole lot coming out in the next few weeks, maybe it'll hang around. And honestly, this is good news for STX Entertainment. Their first #1 debut ever. They haven't been around too long, but good news for them, especially coming off of 2018 that was pretty darn dreadful, almost as bad as it could get. Almost all their films underperformed huge at the box office and most likely lost money, even though there's no way to really know 100%. I mean, we had Gringo, Adrift, Mile 22, Happy Time Murders, and Peppermint all looking to be losses at the box office in 2018 for STX. They did have Den of Thieves and I Feel Pretty, which did decently well. But everything else was just rough. A big loser of 2018 was STX. But they are starting off on a positive note here in 2019. So maybe this will be a sign of things to come from STX Entertainment. We'll see. They do also have a film in theaters right now, Second Act, which is in its 4th week. It opened late December, so that would be the last film of 2018 for them, to see if it goes into the plus category, the loss category. It is had a production budget of around $16 million. Is currently has a domestic gross of $36.3 million. So definitely not doing as poorly as some things like Happy Time Murders and Gringo and Peppermint did. I mean, those were rough. Got pretty bad reviews. I mean, Gringo and Happy Time Murders got like really bad. Peppermint was not as bad, but certainly not good reviews. And box office similarly poorly. Moving on to number 2, finally dethroned was Aquaman. Tried to go for the 4-peat, could not quite get there. Finished the weekend with $17.3 million in 3,800 theaters, dropping 44% from last week. bringing its total domestic gross to just under $288 million, and that's not too bad. But the news throughout the holiday season was Aquaman was just killing it overseas. It opened up overseas before it opened up here, and it did great then. Then when it opened up in China, it exploded even more. It was crazy, and it passed 1 billion global gross this weekend, becoming the first film in the DCEU to do so. It already was the highest grossing DCEU film. Of course, number 2, when you're looking at the global gross, is Batman vs. Superman at $873.6 million. Aquaman is now sitting at $1.021 billion global gross, with its 2 largest markets being the United States at 287.9 million, and China carrying a heavy load too with 287.3 million, just behind the U.S. So, I mean, honestly, I didn't love the movie. I thought it was fine to watch once. I ended up going to see it a second time with some friends. It was not as entertaining the second time at all. But people are loving it, man. It's raking in the dough for DC, and it is actually the second highest grossing DC film ever. Not just the DCEU, but any DC film. Of course, most of the old ones have just been kind of priced out by inflation. This is non-adjusted. Dark Knight Rises is still holding on to that number 1 spot with 1.084 billion. So 0.06 above. So that's about. Let's see. Let's try and get rid of these decimals here, which I should have done before. But so it's about 60 million above Aquaman. And so Aquaman has a pretty solid shot at passing Dark Knight Rises to become the highest grossing DC film of all time in the coming weeks. It'll take a few, especially 17 million this weekend, and that'll continue to drop. But I think it'll probably get there, especially again since not a whole lot coming out for the rest of the month. So we'll see. It'll be close, but it definitely has a chance of getting there. Dark Knight Rises, interesting film. Good in a lot of ways, not so good in some ways. My favorite DC film is still probably Wonder Woman, although a couple of the early Batman movies are close to my heart as well. Well, except for Dark Knight. Dark Knight's really good, which is of course the 3rd highest grossing DC film ever worldwide, but that has been passed by Aquaman now, just barely. I mean, it's by like only a few $1 million. And after spending a little too long on Aquaman, let's move down to the next 3 in the top 5, which are all Sony films. So congratulations to Sony. You did all right this week, and coming in at number 3, A Dog's Way Home. Just a feel-good story about dogs. It's a spiritual successor to A Dog's Purpose. This was a movie that had a very interesting marketing campaign where the trailers essentially told you the entire story. They include, like, the final shot of the trailer was the dog coming home. And it was like, wow, okay. I mean, I guess they just really wanted to show audiences, like, hey guys, the dog doesn't die in this movie, so you can see it and have fun. And people did. Brought in 11.2 million this weekend in just over 3,000 theaters. It just right along with expectations, nothing too crazy like The Upside did, and got similar to The Upside again, not super hot on the critics ratings wise. 6.3 IMDb, 50 Metascore, 56% critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes. But it does have that 88% audience rating and that A- cinema score on the polls coming out of the theaters, which is pretty solid. So, again, similar to The Upside, I think it's just a feel-good story. People want to go and smile and enjoy life, even if it's not the most, like, detailed something, sometimes you just want to hear a good story, and so they're doing a good job at that. But you want to talk about a good story and a great film, in my very humble opinion, Into the Spider-Verse, coming in at number 4, continuing to hold well in its 5th week after having that disappointing opening weekend. I'm so glad that it's held well. It's, of course, coming off of its Golden Globe win of Best Animated Picture of the Year. Might see it come around again come Oscar season. Fingers crossed. I'm a big proponent for this film. I'm just, I think it is a good story and has a lot of interesting characters. But as a big animation fan, I really want a film that tried something as unique animation-wise as this film did, and I want to see this do well, not only because it would be nice to see a sequel to it, I definitely see that, but also because I want this to be a sign to studios that, hey, animation is an incredible medium, and you can do so much with it. And if you want to try something new that's not just the same CG style that we see in the Disney movies, and like every company now has their CG style, and they just kind of stick to it. But Sony's like, you know what, we're going to do something different, and they did. And it was different than all their other movies and almost any other big budget animation film we've seen recently. And I want it to be this green light to other studios. Say, hey, if you want to try something new with animation, you can. And if you take your time and you craft a great film, people will see it. And so it's done a lot better than expected coming off that opening weekend. Now its domestic total is at $147.8 million. It brought in an additional it brought in $9 million this weekend, bringing its domestic total up to $147.8. It had a $90 million budget. Globally, its gross is up to just over $300 million. So if you double that production budget to account for marketing, it has brought in a decent chunk of change. I would have liked for it to do a little bit better domestically for sure, but definitely after getting scared off that first week, I'm glad that people have kept coming back to it, and I hope it continues to do well. And again, maybe we'll see it get another little bump if it does well at the Oscars, but we'll see. It actually has now become Sony Animated Pictures' third highest grossing film domestically of all time, just passing Hotel Transylvania. Or actually, no, it hasn't passed Hotel Transylvania yet. Sorry about that. It's Hotel Transylvania is at $148 million. So it's a couple $100,000 over Into the Spider-Verse right now. So during the week, Into the Spider-Verse will probably pass over Hotel Transylvania 1 to become Sony Animated Pictures' third highest grossing film of all time. Of course, 1 and 2 are, 1 is Hotel Transylvania 2 and number 2 is Hotel Transylvania 3, which are both in the high 160 million grossing, and Into the Spider-Verse will likely not quite make it there, but we'll see, because again, while there's not a whole lot coming out soon, the next really big film after Glass this week is going to be Lego Movie 2, which is pretty direct competition with Into the Spider-Verse, which will, honest, Spider-Verse will be into, week 8 or 9 by then anyway. So we'll see. Maybe it will become Sony's highest grossing film, or Sony Animated's highest grossing film, which would be very cool to see. Again, because I love it and I want to see films I love do well. Even though it did cost about $10 million more than the Hotel Transylvania films, which were all around $80 million production budget. If it becomes your highest grossing film, it's hard to complain about that. And rounding out that top 5 is going to be Escape Room, another Sony film. In its second weekend, it dropped 50%, brought in $8.9 million. It had a very, very good opening weekend. Its domestic total is now at $32.4 million. It had just a reported $9 million budget, so it's doing all right. It did everything it needed to do opening weekend pretty much, and so even though it did have a solid drop, it'll probably continue to do just fine for everything Sony really needs it to do. Replicas was the other new film this weekend, and man, did that thing get panned in the critic reviews. It's under 20% on Rotten Tomatoes. I haven't even looked on IMDb. I mean, this thing just got destroyed. Doesn't seem like audiences liked it any better. That came in at 13 this week in over 2,000 theaters. A little rough. Brought in $2.3 million. Yeah, that thing had a lot of production issues, and so it's not a huge surprise that it didn't end up being a stunning film. And last but not least, we will of course take a look at the per theater average winner this week, which is Cold War, which was in 10 theaters and brought in $97,507. That's an average of $9,751 per theater. That's an Amazon film, and it is about, let me see, the Cold War, obviously. And oh my gosh, I should have looked this up first. It appears it's actually a romance. Gosh, it's hard to, because this didn't just open this week. So this is the stuff I should have looked up beforehand. Yeah, so this one is actually a romance between two people from different backgrounds and temperaments who are fatefully mismatched and yet condemned to each other. It is set against the background of the Cold War in Poland, Berlin, Yugoslavia, and Paris. Depicts an impossible love story in impossible times. Currently has a 7.8 on IMDb and a 90 Metascore, as well as some solid critic reviews. 93% certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes with an 88% audience score. Romantic drama from Amazon. Just in 10 theaters right now, but going for that Oscar push. We shall see. I haven't heard a lot of buzz about that, but maybe we'll hear some more as it continues to expand. All right, spent a lot more time talking about that top 5 than I probably should have, but this week I was hoping to maybe end the show going down the top 10 highest grossing domestic films of 2018, but let's just take a look at the one film that's coming out next week, which is Glass, which is really the only big film in January. It's of course from M. Night Shyamalan. This is the first film from M. Night that people have really been excited about in a long time. I mean, of course, way back, Sixth Sense. Then he had Unbreakable, which is 2004 when that came out, I want to say. I just looked this up. No, just 2000 is when Unbreakable came out. And it got hit kind of hard from reviews because it was just after The Sixth Sense. It was a very different movie, but still had pretty positive stuff. And then it was just all downhill from there, man. Just, oh my gosh. And dude, I watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, the movie, recently for the first time, and I knew it was going to be bad. Was not prepared for how bad it was. It was brutal to get through, but I had to watch it for a paper I was writing. Oh gosh, rough stuff. But then he had The Visit a few years ago, which had pretty positive reviews, and then he had Split a couple years ago, which had really positive fan reactions. And so when he came around, yeah, successor to Split. I've had 2 good movies in a row now. This is going to complete the comeback, and it's a sequel to a film you guys just loved, and also to Unbreakable. People are really excited about this one, but it got really not good reviews. When the release embargo lifted earlier this week, it has a 36% critical score on Rotten Tomatoes on 45 reviews, a 45 Metascore. There's just some interesting yeah, I mean, people are saying it's slow. I mean, some of it is like a lot of people going into this. I'm not sure if they're like they know the connection to Unbreakable. I mean, obviously, in all the trailers it said from the director of Unbreakable and Split, and obviously these characters in Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson's characters are directly from Unbreakable. They're the main characters of Unbreakable. But from some of the reviews I'm seeing, I'm seeing some people who maybe didn't know that it was connected or just didn't think that they had to see the previous films to know what was going on. Like, I don't know if that's a factor. I think there definitely will be a lot of general audience members who have not seen Unbreakable but are going to see this, which from everything I hear of Split and Unbreakable, Unbreakable is the one you have to see going into Glass to know what's going on. You should see both, but if you are only seeing one, Unbreakable is the one to see. And since that came back in 2000, I think there's going to be a lot of people. I mean, that was 19 years ago, 18, if depending on how you want to count it. But I mean, like, that's a long time, and I think there's going to be a lot of people who have not seen it going into this movie, and they might be a little disappointed, but at the same time, this does have a lot of hype behind it. There is no competition right now as far as anything else new coming out. The next big film is February 8th, The Lego Movie 2, which is a completely different audience than this film is going for. So it has that going for it. It is still projected to open at $50 million this weekend, which would be very solid. That is down 25% from last week, which is due in large part to the really poor critical reactions, which has probably hurt some excitement, but I think it'll still do pretty well. And then the question will just be how well did the general audience react to it, and will it hold well? And I don't know what the budget is for this one, so what it's gonna try to make. The production budget, according to Box Office Mojo, is about $20 million. So I mean, if it has a opening of around $50 million, it doesn't have to do a whole lot in the following weeks to make it worth its money. But and Shyamalan has always done better, I think, with a smaller budget. But I honestly just kind of hope it's a fun film, because I just saw Unbreakable and Split recently, and I enjoyed them both. So I'm hoping this is gonna continue to be good, and maybe this will be one of the movies where audience members and critics are just split on it. Split, haha, badoom. But only time will tell, and you can hear about it next week when you come back here for the box office breakdown. We're going to be riding through to the end of the year. Will probably be a little break in between the winter and the spring quarter, but going to keep you updated on all the fun news coming up. February is going to be intense. A lot of cool stuff coming out then, and pretty much from February on out, it's going to be super intense. But come back next week to see how Glass did. Come back the week after for everything else. I'll still be here, your host, Garret Neal, and we'll be here live on Radio DePaul, Chicago's College Connection. Have a great night.